Hello and welcome. My name's Karina Thompson. I'm an embroiderer and beta tester for mySewnet embroidery software, and I'm going to be demonstrating how to get the best out of the mySewnet embroidery software as part of this PFAFF Festive Facebook event. So what I'm actually going to do is hop on over to the software itself. Now, I'm on a PC with the platinum level of software installed, but everything I show you today you should be able to do on a Mac. And indeed, we've got a couple of projects that you can use in the silver level of the software as well. I've very deliberately aimed this session at those of you out there that are beginners or perhaps are intimidated and terrified of actually getting started using the software. And so what I want to do is share my top tips with you of how to get the most out of the software. So I am going to, let me open up a new hoop. And in this case, I have a 240 by 150 hoop for example, that you could use on the Creative, wait a minute, let me lean the right way, the Creative Ambition 640 behind me. So that's, you know, it's a good size hoop, but it's not one of the biggest size hoops. And what I wanted to do was I was going to start off by introducing you to the projects in the hoop. So there's a couple of ways you can get to the wizards. The first one is I'm going to click on the File tab over here, and you'll see all the wizards are listed down here, and here we have projects in the hoop. Now what in actual fact I'm going to do is I want to take a moment to talk about, well, what's a project in the hoop? So for instance, a project in the hoop is in many ways like it says in its title. It's a project that you do from start to finish, all within your embroidery hoop. So for instance, I've got a passport cover here, I've got key rings, I've got coasters, and one of my top tips would be, if you are new to projects in the hoop, think about starting with something really simple like the coasters, because that's a really good way to get started. My personal favourite is there are zip pouches. So for instance, this one is like an old retro floppy disk. You can also get them so that they look like old-fashioned cassettes. There are some key rings that you can stitch out and customize. And another favorite is this one here, which in actual fact is listed under the pencil cases. But you can see in actual fact, this would make a lovely present as, for instance, as a makeup bag or something like that. But today, I'm actually going to start off with this little Christmas decoration that you can work with. So what I'm going to do, let me go back to the software. And in actual fact, we're just going to zoom in a little bit closer. Let's come in a little bit more, just drag this down a little bit so you can see exactly what's going on. So when we click on the project in the hoop wizard, this dialog box opens up, and you can see on the category tab here, if I click on those pull down arrows, so you can see we've got these different categories in here like coasters, key rings, talked about passport covers and the pencil cases and pouches, you know, but today we're going to go with the Christmas ornaments. And what always happens is that there's always some kind of preview there that will give you some kind of sense of what that category is. But then down here, we've also got a style. So there's different varieties of each of those categories. So for instance, if I click on Gingerbread Man, you can see that preview's changed. But today I'm actually going to go with star number 3, which is this star here that has a little bit of applique in it. Now on some of the projects in the hoop you can actually change the dimensions, for instance on the book covers and the phone cases, but we can't in the case of Christmas ornaments. But my big top tip if you're doing a project in the hoop is this one, and that is view the PDF instructions. So you can click on that and there are instructions there about how to create that project. And I would say that that's a really important thing to do, particularly if you're just starting with a project in the hoop, because sometimes you're laying fabric on top of your embroidery, sometimes you're laying it underneath, and it helps you understand that process. So please do at least have a look at the PDF. And then in this case, I'm going to click OK. And here we have our project and it's loaded it into the hoop. Now what I wanted to do is just draw your attention. Can you see we've got an F and a B here? So this star here is going to be the front of our decoration and this star here will be the back of our decoration. And this line along here, in actual fact, it's going to be stitchery, is going to be quite important. Now what I am going to do is I am going to share a little bit of film here of this actually being stitched out. Now my colleague Caroline was doing this. It is on time lapse in case you think Caroline is working very, very fast. So what's happened is the machine has stitched out some placement stitches so she knew where to place the fabric, and so what's now going on is the machine is sort of securing that fabric in place. It's just on that line across the center here, but it's stitching out again some securing stitches in the corner, and now it's asking for a color change. So that's just happening now. So Caroline's just rethreading it, and now it's sort of stitching out the decorative tracery in red on this fabric. It's just working its way around doing that. And then it's stitching out a placement stitch for the applique. And you'll see Caroline's put down a square of red fabric that's now been secured. And then she's going to take the hoop off the machine. And what she's actually using is she's using some applique duckbill scissors, which are really useful if you think you're likely to be doing a lot of machine embroidery applique. I'd definitely put them on your Christmas wish list. And now the machine is sort of stitching out the decorative elements on that applique, and now comes really one of the most important aspects, and that is we take the hoop off the machine, and now Caroline is cutting round the back star and folding it over like that, so the back star is actually underneath, and now the machine is stitching those two stars together. And that's why actually having a look at the instructions beforehand helps you understand what you need to be doing at each stage. And it's just finishing that off. So it's securing all the way around, and now Caroline is cutting around that embroidery, and you can see that it's finished. And in actual fact, so here's the finished one, but let me explain what was going on in terms of that. So as you stitch it out, as you cut it out, you basically have a gap in the center that if you want to, you can actually stuff that, and then you can flip those pieces over and actually with a sewing needle actually do a little bit of hand stitch along that little edge there, and you can catch a piece of ribbon in. And you can see how simple that was as an exercise. I know Caroline said in terms of stitching it out, it only took about 8 minutes to sew out. So what a great way to involve perhaps a young person if you're looking for a project to do over the holidays, perhaps to start somebody's interest actually in sewing. So top tip I'd say in getting started is think about doing some of the projects in the hoop. So let me actually open up another window here. Okay, And in actual fact, what I'm actually going to show you now is, goodness me, in actual fact, I have opened up slightly the wrong hoop. Let me just open up this one. So in actual fact, I want to introduce you to super designs. So there are over 2,000 super designs that are part of both the silver or platinum subscription. And basically, those are designs that you can use within the software. And there's all sorts. You can see we've got animals, we've got applique shapes, we've got sort of decorative borders, buttonholes, cartoons. There really is. Most things are covered in terms of those inbuilt designs. These are felting or twin needles or wing needle designs. But I'm coming all the way down to food and drink. Oh, goodness me. I am coming all the way down to the bottom to just past the sports and the transport to the wreath designs, and I am going to choose this design here. It's on the wreath number 2 and it's number 7, swirl 2. So I'm going to click on that. Now up here, I'm not going to worry about any of the defaults. I'm just going to click on the little arrow that says apply. Now it might be saying, well, Karina, what makes a super design super? So let me explain to you. Can you see we have green handles on our embroidery? And that means that the stitches have yet to be set by the software. And that means you can stretch your embroidery design, you can play with the aspect ratio, you can make it fatter or thinner, and the software will optimize it for stitching out. So you can see that I've stretched it, I've made it quite big. The same would be true if I actually made it very small. So what makes a super design super is that flexibility. So you have over 2,000 designs that to a certain extent you can make to any size. I'm just going to go back to my main screen. I'm going to delete that out and I'm just going to pop that back in. So if, for instance, you know that of the size that you would like to stitch something out, you can actually set it. But in this case, I've just popped it in here. And for reasons that I'm going to explain in a moment, I'm going to go to my Home tab and I am going to copy it. And that's actually put it on my clipboard over here, right next to me. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go onto this tab here that says Encore. Now the Encore feature is available in the silver level of the software. So what I show you, you're going to be able to do if you have a silver subscription. And what Encore is about is Encore allows you to put embroideries, particularly if they're small embroideries, into some kind of pattern. And you can put them into circles, you can put them into various shapes, you can put them into lines, and you can put them around your hoop. But today I'm going to go with circle. And in terms of my repeats, I'm going to pop it in 12 and then I'm going to click preview. And straight away you can see that has put my embroideries into a circle. And I don't know if you noticed, as I move my pointer in between these two black lines, it becomes this little cross. And if I do a left click and drag, I can either make that circle bigger, or in this case I'm going to make it smaller so they just touch, and then I'm going to let that go. And then you need to click apply, and I'm always forgetting to click apply, so I'm going to click apply. And can you remember, I've still got that original design on my clipboard. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go back to my Home tab and I'm going to paste it, and that's put it in the center. I'm going to go back to the Encore tab again, and I am going to change my numbers, and this time I am going to put 36 in here. Now, a top tip, if you are going to kind of stack multiple embroideries using Encore, what I would say to you is try and have a common factor within your numbers. So in this case, I'm going to be working with common factors of 6, because in terms of your repeats, they will work much better if you've done that. So just like before, I'm going to click on preview. You can see that this is way too big at the moment for my hoop, which is a 260 by 200. But what I'm going to do is, just like before, I'm going to squeeze this down. So that's a left click, and I'm just going to drag that down. But I don't know if you noticed here, we've got a little white handle on the side. And what I'm actually going to do is I am going to pull this out, so that is beginning to turn it into an oval. And then, as I mentioned before, I'm going to click apply. And this is beginning to look pretty Christmassy. It might be you say, actually, I don't want it. I just like the idea of this looking kind of special. That way I can use it all year round. But no, I'm going all out for Christmas today. So I'm going to click on this arrow up here, and I'm going to choose Holly 2 on that wreath. And just like before, I'm going to click apply. I'm going to go back to my Encore tab. And in this case, I'm going to change that number to 18 and click preview. And then I'm going to pull that down so that holly wreath is just inside my kind of filigree. And then I'm going to click apply. And you can see how this is really beginning to look like a Christmas table place setting. Now what I want to do, another top tip, is this little button up here, and it's called Lifeview, and I use this all the time. So I'm going to click on it. So what Lifeview does is it does a preview of what your embroidery is going to look like. And if necessary, I can zoom in here. I can move this around to look at something in particular. And I use this a lot to kind of have a look at what's happening with my fill patterns. But something that I really find useful is this little show reel here. Now, if I click on that, you can see that it's playing away. And it gives me kind of a sense of what this might look like. In a moment, it's going to kind of zoom in. So I can get a sense of what this is going to look like before I've actually taken the time and the expense in terms of thread and stabilizer and fabric to stitch it out. And that's a really useful way of having a look and just thinking, is that what it's going to look like? Okay, so remember to think about using Lifeview, and you'll often find it on the home tab. I'm just going to close this down here. You'll often find the Lifeview is always on the home tab, but there is always that shortcut up there. Okay, and and I talked earlier about how this was a slightly larger hoop, but let me just share with you a couple of designs for that smaller hoop that would be suitable for either a Creative 1.5 or the Creative Ambition 640. So you can see in this one, I've just placed those as decorative. I think the number, again, that center roundel was 12, but I think in this case, I just used 30 of those. And I think I've got another one here. Let me just get that up. Here we go. And in this case, you can see I've got an oval of holly wreaths. In this case, you can see up here, I think I had to go down to 24 to make that fit in. But one of my other top tip about using Encore, I would say to you, is be playful. See, you can see how I worked. What happens if, that you squeeze it in, that you change the numbers? It's great fun as that way of working. And if I'm happy with my design and I've had a look at it in Lifeview, then at this point, if necessary, I can then click on the center mySewnet if I'm lucky enough to have a mySewnet enabled embroidery machine, or of course I can go File and export it if I usually use a USB stick to get my embroidery designs onto my embroidery machine. And of course mySewnet is compatible. You can export your embroideries in all the main file formats that are available. So for instance, if you usually use a DST or a PEC or a PES file format, you can do that as well. So let's talk about another project. Okay, let me just open up another window here. Okay, so very often when people are just getting going, one of the things people often like to do when they first start working with embroidery machines is perhaps they're looking to customize an object already, that maybe they're looking to put an embroidery design, or maybe a name or some wording on something like a bag or a hat or a shirt of some kind. So let me introduce you and show you how you can get started working with lettering. So again, I can do what I'm about to show you in the silver level of the software. So I've got a letter tab here, and if I click on this pull down arrow, you can see I think there's something like 245 different embroidery fonts within the software that you can use. So you can see we've got kind of traditional fonts, we've got scary ones, we've got retro ones, we've got some fancy ones suitable for monogramming, modern ones, we've got some sort of fun ones that you could use with puffy foam. We've got some really very beautiful decorative fonts in here. There's just a huge range, all the way up to applique. Just as we come back, I've got to point out I do love the cats and the dogs, although I don't think it's fair that there isn't a coloured cat one as a cat person. But anyway, I'm going to come down here to the fun category, and I'm going to choose the Christmas font. So I'm going to click on it. There it is. And what I am going to do here, I'm going to put my caps lock on, and I am going to write head. I'm going to put a return in and put chef in. Now, a top tip, if you're using lettering, can you see I've got some numbers here? It says 50 to 100 mil, and that means for the optimal stitch out quality, use this font between those sizes, between 50 mil and 100 mil. Okay, and whenever you load up a font, it will come in here with the minimum size here. I'm going to be happy with that. I'm going to leave it on the horizontal block, and then I am going to click apply. And here is my font. In here, again, that's good to go. But it might be say, well, actually, it'd be really good. I'm looking to put this on an apron, a Christmas apron. And it would be really good to see what it might look like on that apron. Now, this stage, unfortunately, you do need the platinum level of the software. You can get your fancy lettering here and stitch it out on your apron at silver. Great. You know, I could go here and either do send to mySewnet or do the file and export as I explained. But let me show you another a great way of using the software that I think is really underexploited. So I'm going to go to the View tab, open up the background wizard, and I've got the garment button checked. I'm going to click Next. And then I'm going to click Load Background. And now don't worry if you haven't downloaded the background option. You still can do this. You just won't have all the variety of colour choices that I'm about to show you. So for instance, you can see we've got bags and hats, we've got children's wear, we've got homeware, ladies, and for instance, if I open up the ladies, you can see we've got hoodies, we've got polo shirts, things like that. But in actual fact, I'm going to go to home, I'm going to go to aprons and go to the bib. I'm going to click on large, and you can see all these different coloured versions. So if you hadn't got the background, the additional backgrounds loaded, you'd only ever just have one of these. So for instance, you know, if you were looking at polo shirts, you'd just have one polo shirt, which you might say, well, that's great, Karina, that's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to choose this silver grey down here. I know it's selected because I've got a blue box around it. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to click Finish. And what I need to do is I need to zoom out. So I'm just going to come back here, and to zoom out, I can click down here, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit more. And then if I come up here to the move and rotate background, what I then can actually do, again, left click, I can drag this up here so that that is sort of in a place where I'm likely to be stitching it out. And of course, if I click on my Lifeview and go to the show reel that we talked about before, that's actually going to give me that sense of what this embroidery might look like stitched out on that item. And again, that's a really useful tool. If I need to, I can actually click on this button here, and I can either share a picture or indeed the video itself. So imagine you've perhaps got a friend who wants maybe you to do some embroidery on some polo shirts for maybe an organisation, that you can actually do the planning for it, and then you can send them that little film and say, oh, is this what you were thinking about? You know, is this the colours that you were thinking about? Is it the right size? Those kind of things. So hopefully you can see what a useful tool actually using the background wizard can be. So let me just close this down and let's move on to something else. So it might be when you're getting started, you're kind of a little bit lost because there's all these buttons on a screen that perhaps you're not quite sure what they all mean, you can't remember. And let me talk about ways that the software can actually help you. So for instance, the first thing is, if I take my pointer and I just lay it over a button, there's an explanation of what that button does will automatically come up. So in this case, it's telling me that this button will rotate the design 45 degrees clockwise. You know, if I go to any button on here, that dialog box will open up, and it's going to help me understand if I can't remember what something is. So that's my top tip number one. Top tip number two in terms of finding help is this one over here. There actually is a help button. So if I click on that, now this button here is going to say what version of the software that I'm using. So I'm just going to close that back down. What's a lot more useful is the other button which says help. And if I click on that, that's actually going to open up the online software manuals. So let me just drag that across so you can see that. And so for instance, if I actually go all the way up to the top, you'll see we've got getting started here. If I click on that, it's actually giving me some basic information about getting started. And then there's always some links here. So if I click on that, this is going to explain what's happening with the welcome screen, for instance. And of course, we have, there's a search facility up here. So let me go up here to the search feature and put in lettering. Still got my cap locks on, and if I search that, you can see I've got all sorts of information here about how to go about using the lettering feature. There's two other places where you can look for help. So I'm going to open up a new tab and I am going to search. mySewnet.com. So this is the main mySewnet website that I'm sure if you have our software you'll be familiar with. But over here we've got the Knowledge Center, and if I click down here, that opens up a useful section where there's all sorts of frequently asked questions, but what I do want to do is introduce you to the Vantage Point newsletter. And for instance, if I click on the Autumn Leaves rug mug and click Read More, that's opening up with more information about that project. There's a lesson that you can download, and very frequently those lessons come with some kind of free embroidery design, not always, but frequently. But more importantly, there is a video done by my American colleagues, Don and Phil, and there is essentially a video of how to do that lesson, both for PC and more importantly for Mac users as well, and that's a really useful tool. And the other place where you might find useful is, in actual fact, if I go to YouTube, we in the UK have our own YouTube channel, which is mySewnet UK, where there are all sorts of instructional videos that will help get you started. So there's a series that's called Mastering the Basics, Getting Started with Digitizing. So these are little short videos that are specifically aimed at helping you get started with our software. So let's go back to the software. And I've got a couple of other projects that I want to share with you. So let me open up a new window. And I am going to, let me introduce you to another way of finding the wizards if it's a PC, or the assistants if you're on a Mac. You might remember I talked about going from the welcome screen. So if I click on File, here's the welcome screen, and here are those wizards or assistants. But let me show you another way of finding them. And my top tip is I would always, if possible, open those wizards the way that I'm about to show you. So up here we've got a Create tab. If I click on that, you can see here are my wizards. So here's my project in the hoop. But what I want to do is I want to introduce you to the quilt block wizard. So I'm going to click on this, and you can see a bit like before, we've got a wizard here with various, there's a preview here, and we've got different options. So you can see the default is one with an embroidery in the center, and then we have sort of a decorative stitching around it. You could have essentially a filled shape within a quilt block. You could have almost like the opposite, where the shape is blank but the rest of the quilt block is filled. You could have a quilt block that's just filled, or you could just have, and essentially this one, it just stitches the outer shape of your quilt block. But in this case, I'm going to go with the default. I'm going to click Next. And if you've done any quilting or patchwork, you'll probably be aware of these sort of shapes, that these are sort of a lot of the quilt blocks that we tend to use if we're doing patchwork. And it might be that you actually make a quilt block that you put into a project, but I'm suggesting actually what we could do is we could do a piece of embroidery that we're going to put in a decorative shape that might be suitable for, say, embroidering on a project that maybe we, as part of a decorative cushion or perhaps a stocking, something like that. So we've got a whole load of shapes in here, so perhaps a square or a rectangle might be good, but I'm going to go with the hexagon. And then down here, it's actually asking, well, how big do you want this hexagon to be? Now, I know I'm in that smaller hoop, so I'm going to put this in, not at 20 mil, I'm going to put this in at 170 mil, because I know that that will fit. And then I'm going to click, oh, now, nearly missed it. The software will help you. If you are actually going to piece this, you could actually have an embroidered line around your embroidery. You could have a stitched line that would indicate exactly 1/4 inch if you set it right. And of course, as quilters, we like to have that. But I'm not using that for piecing, so I'm not going to check that. I don't want that cut line around my block. And then I'm going to click next. Now, you might remember this little motif down here from my clipboard from earlier, but I'm not going to use it. I'm actually going to use an embroidery from the free download embroideries from the mySewnet website. If you go to the download page, you'll find them there. So I'm going to click Open Embroidery. And if I come down here, so I'm in the stitch folder in embroidery, and I'm going to just go all the way down to the snowman here, not the decorated snowman, the snowman which is here. I'm going to open him up, and just because I think he's a cute little cutie, I'm then going to click next. Now at this point, if I wanted to, I could twist my snowman, I can flip him, mirror it, and if I want to, I can change the margins of my outline just by using those arrows. It's gone red because, can you see down here, I'm actually outside my shape. So let's actually, I'm just going to bring that up to 4 mil. I'm going to go to next. And the default always is this sort of stipple in here. If I wanted to, I could choose parallel lines or angled lines. I've also got diamonds and squares. I've got cross hatches and curved cross hatches. I'm going to talk about the motifs in a moment. I could have some echo quilting. I could go a contour, where it's actually sort of following the contours of both the shape itself and the embroidery. Or if I wanted to, I could put in the shape category, where it's actually mirroring, it's putting contours round an internal shape that at the moment you can't see. But I want to come back here to motif. Now, if you have chosen the motif line at all anywhere within mySewnet, that you'll be aware that the default is always this star. And it might be you say, Karina, that's fabulous, that's Christmassy enough for me. Absolutely fine. Then you could click finish, good to go, and export it. But let me show you another top tip, a way that we can actually push this even further. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Options tab. And that opens up this dialog box. Now the default is always Universal General Motifs, star number 5. But if I click on the Universal tab here, you'll see I've got the option for PFAFF. And if I click on that, that actually then allows me, in terms of my categories, I've got virtually every stitch that is in a top of the line PFAFF sewing machine. So for instance, I'm going to come down to 5.3, so the decorative stitches, and I am going to choose, I'm going to scroll down because I think, yep, here we go, number 28. I'm going to click on that, and if I click OK, that's actually put that decorative stitch as my background fill. And it could be that on my project, let's say my cushion or my stocking that I'm making, that I'm using those decorative stitches somewhere in the making of that project as well. And here it is, I've included it in my actual embroidery itself. I'm going to click finish, and there it is. It's good to go. I can either, if I've got that mySewnet enabled machine, I can send it direct to my machine, or of course I can go and do the file and export. And I don't know about you, I think it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas there. So let me share one last project with you. So a lot of people, when they get started with embroidery software, what they ultimately want to do is they want to create their own embroidery designs from scratch. So let me show you my top tips for actually getting started on doing that. Now, I'm in the main part of the software as I've been doing throughout. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Create tab. I am going to, at this point, click on the Digitizing wizard or assistant. And can you see I've got this dialog box has come up here, and it's actually opening up the digitizing module within mySewnet. And this is one of the features within mySewnet compared with earlier versions of our software like Premiere Plus that I think is a real game changer. Again, just like before, I've got different options. So if I wanted to, I could do an express trace or create a border, but I'm going to stick with this create an express embroidery. Just like before, I'm going to click next. It's going to ask me, well, where's your picture coming from? If I wanted to, I could paste a picture in there, but please remember you do have to have the copyright for that image. I'm just going to click on load a picture, and again I'm using some of the free downloadable samples here. So I'm on the pics file here that's in Digitizing, and there is this sort of sprig of holly here, so I'm going to click, I know it's active because it's blue, and then I'm going to click OK. And here's that picture. So I'm then going to go new. If I wanted to, I could actually crop this down, but I'm not going to worry about any of that. I am then just going to click next. There's some editing possibilities in there. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to click next. And now at this point it's saying, how big do you want this? And I'm just going to stick with fit design to hoop. If I wanted to, I could actually specify the size of that design, but I'm not going to worry about that today. I'm then going to click next. And at this point, it's actually beginning to make some sort of suggestions. You can see we've got a preview here of what it thinks that design is likely to look like. Top tip I would say is I would always check remove all background color areas, because there's a tiny little bit of white in here in where that holly leaf is connected. I'm just going to click next, and this is the software thinking about it, and you can see we've got a preview in here. If I wanted to, what I would say is think about the fabric advisor. If you know the fabric that you're working on, I would actually suggest put that in. Because the underlay that gets laid down if you're working on a piece of fleece might be different to, for instance, working on sheer. But I'm going to stick with woven. But what I am going to do is, because I've got lots of areas here of solid underlay, top tip I would say, because I've got areas of solid embroidery here, I'm going to put down some design underlay in there. That's just going to give me a better effect. I personally quite like it where I go with, I'm opting for more areas of fill than satin. Basically what I'm saying to the software on with this slider here is, if in doubt, I'd rather have it as fill rather than satin. That's a personal opinion. I just prefer that. I'm going to click refresh preview just because I've made those changes with the fabric advisor. And then at this point, I'm going to click finish. And so here is my embroidery design, and we are in, at the moment, we are in the digitizing module here that has opened up. If I wanted to, I could actually make this full screen so that I could really see it, but I just want you to be able to see that essentially I've got two screens going on here. And this would allow me, the digitizing module, you can do all sorts of kind of fun stuff, like in this case, I've selected part of this pattern in the, we call this the film strip over here on the right, on the left. I'm going to do a right click and I am going to choose properties. And that opens up this dialog box. This is the fill properties that if I wanted to, I can then click on this little arrow. I could change the fill properties of that object. And if I click OK, I'm just going to click on another part. Can you see I've changed those fill properties? And if I think that's finished, if I think I'm happy with it, what I'm going to do is I am going to click up here, finish. Now, if I had gone to full screen, all that I'd need to do is just find it down here and click on it that way. I'm going to click finish. I'm going to quickly nip over to my letter tab over here, and you can see I've already put in Merry Christmas using Colton, which is another one of my favorites, but in this case I am going to choose the full circle. And the fact this is on two lines is going to be quite important, and you'll see why in a moment. And then I'm going to click apply. And that has put that lettering into a circle. I'm just going to do a left click and drag it. And you can see I can just going to move this little green handle in here and this one down here. And you can see that this is really becoming quite a unique embroidery design. But it might be you go, well, do you know what, Karina? I am not sure about that fill pattern that you've done. Not a problem. Let me show you what you can do. Over here, can you see I put my pointer over this little icon here on that film strip, and it's telling me this is a design object. That means it's telling me that this is an embroidery design I've created. The A down here is telling me that that's lettering. So if I then do a right click, it says edit in digitizing. So if I click on this, it's going to open up that embroidery design. Here's the screen opening. It's showing me that design. I'm in the editing module, and at this point what I'm actually going to do is I am going to click on this object, and in this case I'm going to go with global properties, and I am going to zoom in so you can see a little more clearly. I am going to choose, and I think there's something like 240 different fill patterns. I'm just going to scroll through. You can see we've got all sorts of different patterns in here, and I am going to go with some of the circles. Let's choose this one here, so number 65. And if I click apply, and then what I can actually do, I'm actually going to click on my screen over here. So that's opened it up. Another way to do that would be to actually click on it down here and go to that window. And I can see this is my design in here. If necessary, I can use my zoom down here to zoom in just a little bit more. Let's have a little closer look at it. And I can see I'm happy with, I'm not 100% sure about that. You know, maybe I need a spikier fill. Well, that's fine, because my digitizing module's still open. So it's all interconnected. So I can edit and really make quite refined choices. So just like before, I'm going to go to my global properties, click on here, and let's just go down and choose one of these diamond patterns in here, click OK, and then if I hop back over here, if I'm happy with how that's looking, I can then click Finish. And then of course it's ready to go in terms of either using the Center mySewnet feature or the export, the file and export onto my USB stick. So hopefully you can see how you can get started using the mySewnet embroidery software. You know, take some time, be playful with it. We would love to see pictures of your projects. And also we'd love to hear from you with suggestions for future sessions on Facebook where we specifically look at things to do with mySewnet. I hope you found this a useful session, and I hope you don't think it's too early for me to say Merry Christmas.